And that's a clip from Studio 666. The man behind it is Dave Grohl, who is sitting in front of his drum kit by the look of it. Hello, Dave. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Now, I think, are you still in Los Angeles? Because you were going to be here, but the planes got canceled because of the storms. Is that right?
I mean, I've if it weren't for Eunice, I would be there with you right now. But
Yeah.
no, bags were packed. I was sitting next to my suitcase with a phone in my hand for about 36 hours until finally the whole thing got shut down. I actually did get on a plane at one point and took my shoes off and had a glass of wine and started a movie. And then the pilot came over and said, sorry, we can't take off because the parking brake doesn't work. I'm like, what? And so then they just sent us home.
The parking brake?
Wow. The parking brake, which evidently is an important part of flying. So who knows?
I'd have thought, hurricane over Newfoundland or something, that's fine. But a parking brake seems a little... Anyway, Studio, introduce us to your story, because it stated very early on in this that this is from a story by Dave Grohl. So introduce us to Studio 666.
So basically, about 3 years ago, we started writing and demoing music for our album Medicine at Midnight. And when I demo things, I like to be in private, and I like to find a place to build a small sort of portable studio, close the doors and just write by myself, record by myself, do all the engineering by myself. So I was looking for a house. My landlord from 10 years ago emailed me and said, hey, I'm going to sell the house. Do you want to buy it? Now, this is the house in the film. I lived in that house about 10 years ago. He said, do you want to buy it? I said, no, but let me rent it for a little while because I want to make music. He said, sure. So I move into the house. And around that same time, a friend of mine said, hey, I just came out of a meeting where these people want to make a horror film with the Foo Fighters. And I said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Why would we do something so ridiculous? That's not something I ever imagined doing. And then I'm in this creepy old house writing music. And I thought, well, wait a second. I already have the house. We'll just finish making the record here in the house and then get some cameras and make a real low budget film. And then it just snowballed into a full length feature film.
So the original intention wasn't for it to be a full length movie.
No, not at all. Oh, that's something we never aspired to do. Like, we've been making music videos for the past 26 years, and that's really fun. And we've made a bunch of documentary films, and those are really important to us. But I don't think it's something that anyone ever imagined doing. But, having been a band so long, it's almost like we do those projects to entertain ourselves more so than you, just to sort of like give ourselves like a little bit of a laugh before we get back on the road again.
So when you pitch the idea, I don't know, do you pitch the idea? Do you tell the band what they're doing? Or did you sit them down and tell them that you had this idea for a horror movie and they had to act and learn words?
All of these ideas begin with, what if? And so I say, what if it's a movie about a band, the Foo Fighters moving into a house turns out to be haunted. I become possessed. I murder every one of her creative differences and then go solo. And everyone's like, that'd be kind of funny. And then that kind of became the premise of the whole thing. I mean, my guys are so used to me coming up with these ridiculous ideas that they basically just say, yeah, whatever, Dave. Okay. And then when they actually become real, they put on the boots and march behind me. So it works.
But presumably there's a discipline to making a movie, which might not be there. I mean, obviously there's a discipline to making a record as well, but I imagine there were some shocks along the way for you guys, just to get this thing done and finished.
Yeah, well, it was tricky too, because we before the pandemic and we were almost finished and we had to stop for about 6 or 7 months. But yeah, I mean, there's, the difference between being in a rock band and being the Foo Fighters in the studio or on stage versus being the Foo Fighters on a movie set. On a movie set, there's a lot of hurry up and wait. There's a lot of getting your fangs in and your contacts on and you wait around for 3 hours. With the Foo Fighters, it's just hurry up. Like, there's no wait. When we come into this room, our rehearsal space, it's like the minute your guitar hits, you're on it for, 3 or 4 hours. And we just we work like this. I don't know if we have the attention span or patience to be movie stars or the talent, but it was fun to try.
Is it quite difficult to so you play yourself, the band play themselves? But I've seen movies. There's one in particular where the celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay was playing himself, and he was very unconvincing, I have to say, playing himself. Is it quite difficult to play yourself in a movie?
Um, you know, the strangest part was someone writing lines for you to say as yourself. So, I mean, there was a script. We had to memorize some of these lines, although a lot of the movie is improvised. Like Taylor Hawkins, our drummer, he refused to learn any of his lines. He's like, I'm not reading this. Like, he didn't want anything to do with it. He said, I'm just going to say whatever I want to say. And because of that, I think he comes off perfectly naturally in the film. When you see him in the movie, that is Taylor Hawkins. It was a little strange, but not too far from the music videos that we make, which are almost like silent films. So whenever you're trying to portray or convey any sort of emotion, it's much more physical. It's almost like slapstick. And but that being said, we weren't approaching this with the subtlety of Marlon Brando. It was much more exaggerated.
So there are two kind of genres working here at the same time. One is the horror genre, which it very much is. And if anyone is thinking you're going to soft pedal on that, the first minute of the film will put them at ease because, hammer, skull, and so on. But the other, and I want to come to horror in just a moment, but the other is band movies. And the idea of a band getting together and making a movie is something that doesn't happen quite so much as it used to be. Did you deliberately go out to do a horror movie and a band movie together? Was that what you wanted?
Well, I mean, none of us were going to do this on our own, that's for sure. And yeah, we all grew up loving that rock and roll movie genre, whether it was Elvis or the Beatles or Kiss or Prince, Girls, whatever it was. There's something about seeing this ensemble jump from one medium to the next, like you're used to seeing these people on stage. You're used to seeing these people as a band performing music, but to see them like kind of acting, watching the Ramones in Rock and Roll High School. It's like just watching the Ramones try to act. We were talking about this, watching Prince in Purple Rain. Prince was a genius. Prince could do anything. He was 5'2" and the best basketball player anyone's ever seen. What's the one thing Prince couldn't do? He couldn't act. And so when I watch Purple Rain, it's like, it's almost reassuring, like, oh God, okay, he is human, But it's funny to see some of your favorite artists or your favorite bands trying their hardest to be cool in that way. It doesn't work.
And on that subject, so Mark Kermode, who's the film critic on this show, who's the biggest Exorcist fan, by the way, bigger Exorcist fan than you, even though he hasn't tried to buy the house, I don't think. Anyway, he was telling me when I was saying, Dave, I was talking to you, he said, you need to talk about the Spencer Davis Group and the band, the film that they did called The Ghost Goes Gear. Have you seen that movie?
I have not seen it, but I have heard of it. Someone mentioned this to me before when I said that we were making a horror film. I haven't seen it yet.
Right. Well, it's it's everything that you just said about. So it's the Spencer Davis Group. It's 1966. It's swinging London. They found out that their manager is a toff and lives in a haunted house, and ghosts appear. So it's not a horror film, but it's a rock and roll band in a house with ghosts. So anyway, it's a lot of it's on YouTube. So you should check. You should check that out. But you are a 100% horror fan, and I was joking about The Exorcist, but you is that true that you nearly bought the house? Did it say?
Well, I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. So I was just over the bridge from Washington, D.C., which is where they filmed The Exorcist, right next to Georgetown University campus. And there was this liquor store at the bottom of those steps that are, seen throughout the movie. It was called Dixie Liquor. And that's where all the punk rockers would go and buy beer on the weekends. It didn't matter if you were 13 years old, these people would sell you a pack of warm beer. And so I spent a lot of time on those steps. And of course I loved the movie and the book. And at one point the house went up for sale, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll buy the Exorcist house. And I thought, wait, do I really want to live there? I don't think so. No.
There are so many aspects of this film which will make people jump with horror and also laugh out loud. I don't want to give too much away, but it's tough being the delivery man to one of your houses who likes Coldplay. I mean, that's a tough gig, isn't it?
Yeah, the guy that plays the delivery man, his name's Will Forte, and I've known him for years, having done Saturday Night Live so many times. He was a cast member for ages. And so that line was written into the script by the screenwriters. And it's funny because I don't know if they realize that that a lot of the people in the script I actually know. So I know the people from Coldplay, and Lionel Richie, another good example, like was written into the script without them knowing that we're friends. So I basically just had to text them and say, hey, do you want to be in a horror film? But yeah, the Coldplay scene's pretty funny.
That, I think I have to say, Dave, that's the sequel, isn't it? That you are on your solo career and Coldplay move in, and then you know, have your way.
But this is the thing, is we've sat around and had group discussions about who to hand this movie to next. What band is willing to take the piss of themselves out of themselves so much that they would make a ridiculous horror film? It's hard to find. I challenge the next band to make Studio 667.
I have two questions, which I'd like to finish on. One, can you just explain a little bit about what it was like, as I understand it, blind calling John Carpenter to get him involved and to get him to write the music?
Well, coincidentally, we share the same lighting designer on tour. So we have a mutual friend, and my lighting guy, Dan, said, hey, you're making a horror film. I know John Carpenter. I do his lights too. You should email him and see if he'll make a cameo. And I thought there's absolutely no way that he would ever do something like that. So, but I did. I emailed him, said, hi, I'm Dave in a band called Foo Fighters, making a horror film. And it turns out that we took his son's band on tour about 15 years ago. And so he returned the favor by not only making a cameo, but writing the theme song as well. So it's pretty amazing.
And that's Daniel Davis, isn't it? Who's
right.
David Davis from the Kinks' son, is that right?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how the relationship works, but I guess John maybe raised him or something like that. But yes, it's a very small rock and roll horror world.
But how fantastic to make a horror film and have John Carpenter do the music. So this is the only question that I have, which has really got nothing to do with the movie. But I have, and tell me if this is wrong, Dave. Apparently you watched Get Back, the incredible documentary about the Beatles, and we've all watched it, or we've watched parts of it, but you watched it with Ringo and Paul. Is that right?
Yeah, I saw a very early cut. It was unfinished, and there were a bunch of people. There were maybe like 20 people that sat around this home theater and watched the footage. And the best part, I mean, obviously the footage is amazing, but the best part was seeing the two of them sort of like snicker and wink and nod at each other when certain moments would happen. It was rather surreal to see them, you know, there on the roof of the studio performing Get Back, and then turning to my left and seeing the two of them in the flesh just a few seats away. It was wow. It was one of my life's greatest moments.
Extraordinary. And what do we get from you next, Dave? Is it more music, more directing, some acting, some stories? What?
You know, it's time to hit the road, man. Like, it's time to get out and do shows. And we did a bunch of shows last year, and they were amazing because I think everybody was really looking forward to the return of live music. And during the lockdown, I remember telling my manager, man, when everything opens up, I want to hit it twice as hard as we ever have. And so this year we're hitting it twice as hard as we ever have. And I can't wait.
Dave Grohl, it's a pleasure to talk to you every time. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for speaking to us today.
See you, Simon. Take care.